I don't care who you are. You're not touching my kitchen." The executive chef didn't even look up from the board where he was breaking down a rack of lamb. His knife moved in slow, deliberate arcs. Behind him, the kitchen of Caldwell's. The only restaurant in Charleston with 3 Michelin stars and a 4-month waitlist, hummed at full pressure. 14 cooks in white jackets, copper pans, the smell of butter and reduction, and something burning on the back burner that someone was already running to fix. Zora hadn't moved from the doorway. She was 23 years old, wearing the same black hoodie she'd worn on the bus ride over, carrying a bag with a broken zipper held shut with a carabiner clip. She had no culinary degree, no internship credit, no letter of recommendation from anyone whose name meant something in this city. What she had was a folded piece of paper in her back pocket, with a recipe on it that she'd written at age 9. Standing on a step stool in a kitchen in East Nashville while her grandfather narrated from memory because the man had never written a single thing down in his life. She said it again, quieter this time, not because she was backing down, because she meant it quietly. 1 dish, that's all I'm asking. Let me cook 1 dish. The chef, his name was Aldrich Boone, and his face appeared, on the cover of 3 food magazines stacked near the host stand, set down his knife. He turned. He looked at her the way a man looks at something that has interrupted a sentence he was already finished with. 1 dish. He repeated it back to her, like he was identifying an insect. He looked at the bag, the hoodie, the carabiner. He looked at her hands, which were calloused along the thumb and forefinger in a way that only comes from years of knife work. But Boone wasn't looking for that. He was looking at everything else. "Where did you train?" "I didn't." Someone near the grill laughed, a soft, private sound, the kind that doesn't need an audience. "You didn't train." Boone picked his knife back up. "You walked into a 3-star kitchen, with no training, no appointment, and no jacket, and you want to cook 1 dish." He looked at his sous chef, a lean man named Perry, who was already shaking his head with the thin smile of a person who has already decided which side they're on. "Who let her in?" "The dishwasher," Zora said. "His name is Quentin." He held the door. More laughter. "Not soft this time." Perry said it loud enough for the line to hear. "The dishwasher let in the next great chef of Charleston. Somebody call the paper." A few of the cooks grinned without looking up, the safe kind of grin. The kind that picks winners before the race starts. There was a woman near the cold station. Mid-40s, silver hair pulled tight, the kind of face that had seen 1,000 kitchens and kept score on all of them. Her name was Lillian Cross, and she'd been expediting at Caldwell's for 6 years. She was the person who held the bridge between the kitchen and the dining room, who knew every table, every ticket, every plate that went out and came back. She didn't grin. She looked at Zora the way you look at something you're not sure you've identified correctly yet. She didn't say anything. Not yet. But she didn't look away either. Boone said, "Get out of my kitchen before I call security." Zora didn't move. "Your bass is overcooking." She said it even, not loud, not pointed, just flat and accurate. The way you'd say the time if someone asked. The entire line shifted. A cook on the fish station spun on his heel. The base in the pan had been sitting 30 seconds past its window. He pulled it immediately, pressed it, looked at Zora with something between irritation and confusion. Boone's jaw set, because she was right. Anyone who'd been in a kitchen longer than 6 months could smell it. And this woman who'd arrived without a jacket or a resume had noticed it from across a room, through the noise and the steam and the clatter of a full-service kitchen. In the first 45 seconds, she'd been standing there. One of the junior line cooks, young, maybe 20, with the kind of energy that only exists before a kitchen breaks you, leaned to his station mate and said under his breath, "How did she catch that?" His station mate said nothing, but he was watching Zora now, not the way you watch a problem, the way you watch something you don't have a category for yet. This is the story of Zora Finch, 23 years old, no degree, no backers, no connections, and 1 dish that rewrote what a room full of professional chefs thought they understood about talent. It started on a Tuesday in October in the kind of kitchen where the wrong people weren't supposed to exist. Zora's grandfather, Leonard Finch, had cooked his whole life without a single person paying him for it. He'd worked the line at a plastics plant in Murfreesboro for 31 years. He came home at 6:15 every evening, changed out of his work clothes in the garage so as not to bring the smell inside, and then went straight to the kitchen. Not to eat, to cook. The kitchen in Leonard's house was not large, One window above the sink that looked into the neighbor's fence. Formica counters with a burn mark near the stovetop from an incident in 1987 that he never fully explained. A cast-iron skillet he'd owned since before Zora's mother was born, seasoned so dark it looked like it had been carved from coal. What came out of that kitchen was not simple. Leonard had learned to cook from his own grandmother, who had cooked for a family in Louisiana for 20 years, and who had, in the process, absorbed the full vocabulary of a culinary tradition that fine dining restaurants spent decades and enormous sums of money trying to approximate. He had never seen a cooking show. He had never eaten at a restaurant that used the word composed. He had a cast-iron pan, a wooden spoon older than most people he knew, and a memory that stored flavors the way a library stores books, cataloged, cross-referenced, instantly retrievable. Zora grew up on a step stool in that kitchen. She was there from the time she could hold a spoon. Leonard didn't teach her the way a program teaches. He didn't explain technique, he told stories. He said, "Your great-great-grandmother made this when the weather turned. She said the pepper had to be cracked by hand, or it was lying to you." He said, "The roux doesn't lie, it tells you exactly how patient you are." He said, "You don't rush fat. Fat knows what it's doing. You're the one who doesn't know yet." Zora listened. She watched his hands. She watched the way he tilted a pan, not because a cookbook said to, but because he could see the heat moving. She started cooking on her own at 11. By 13, she was making things her grandfather tasted with his eyes closed, which was the highest compliment he gave. He died the summer she turned 19. Heart attack. Fast. The kind that doesn't give you time to say anything important, which is the cruelest kind. At the funeral, 3 of his co-workers from the plant told Zora they'd been eating his food for years. He brought lunch every day. They said things like, "That man could have had a restaurant." They said it the way people say things that are true too late to be useful. Zora didn't go to culinary school. The tuition for the good ones cost more than her family made in 2 years. She worked. She cooked everywhere she could get in. A diner in Antioch, a catering company that did church events and corporate lunches, a food truck that ran 2 days a week in a parking lot by the interstate. She saved money with the focused patience of a person who knows exactly what they're saving it for, but doesn't know yet when the door will appear. She read, not cookbooks, library books on technique, food science, the history of French cuisine, the migration of West African flavors through the diaspora. She practiced what she'd read against the memory of her grandfather's hands. She tested the theories against what she already knew in her body. She kept a notebook, small, black, spiral-bound, the cover soft from being opened so many times. Every recipe she'd developed herself, not recreated. Developed, the way her grandfather had, starting from a feeling, moving toward something she could taste in her mind before it existed in a pan. The notebook had 43 recipes in it. She'd never cooked any of them for anyone who could do something about what they meant. Charleston had not been the plan. She'd come for a friend's wedding, 3 days. A bus ticket she'd bought, with a credit card, she was still paying off. She'd eaten at 4 restaurants in 2 days, not Caldwell's. She couldn't afford Caldwell's, and what she'd found was that the best food in the best places in this city was very, very good at being what it already was. Clean technique, beautiful plating, ingredient sourcing that would make a farmer cry, all of it absolutely correct. None of it surprised her, and she had been surprised by food before. That was the thing she was looking for, the feeling of a dish doing something to you that you weren't ready for. On her last night in Charleston, she walked past Caldwell's on her way back from the waterfront. She stood outside for a while, looking at the menu in the glass case by the door. She read the descriptions. She thought about the flavors. She felt the thing that happened when you look at a plan know how to solve differently. She didn't plan what happened next. She just walked to the back entrance, knocked, and Quentin held the door. Now she was standing in Boone's kitchen, with her bag on her shoulder, and her grandfather's recipe in her back pocket, and 11 years of cooking in her hands that nobody in this room was equipped to see yet. Boone said, "Last chance. Walk out or I call security." And then Lillian Cross spoke for the first time. She didn't raise her voice. Lillian Cross never raised her voice. She'd worked in kitchens long enough to know that the loudest person in the room was almost never the most important one. She said from across the station, still not moving toward them, "Boone, you've got a private dining table at 7:30. The Harrington Group, they've pushed that reservation twice, And the third cancel is the last one. You've got one cover that matters tonight and your fish station is already nervous. She paused. Let her cook something for staff meal. 30 minutes. If it's nothing, she leaves. If it's something, you decide. It was not a dramatic speech. It was a practical one, the kind that comes from someone who understands exactly where the leverage is. Boone looked at Lillian for a long moment. She looked back at him with the specific patience of a woman who has survived 6 years in this kitchen by being right more often than anyone wanted to admit. He looked at Zora. You have 30 minutes. You use what's in the prep cooler. You plate for 6. If I don't stop eating after the first bite, you leave without a word. He pointed, and if I do stop eating, if I eat the whole thing, you still leave without a word. You don't get a job out of this. You don't get a recommendation. You cook, and then you go. He wanted her to fail cleanly. One controlled experiment in his own kitchen, in front of his own people, where the outcome confirmed what he already believed, where the lesson was clear, where the girl who showed up in a hoodie with a carabiner on her bag left the way she came in. Zora nodded once. She looked at the prep cooler. She looked at the stove. She looked at the cast iron on the wall, a 10-inch skillet, old, dark, seasoned to the same black coal depth as the one her grandfather had kept. For 40 years, she pulled it down. The kitchen watched without watching. Line cooks kept working their tickets, but the rhythm shifted. The awareness was different. People who weren't supposed to be paying attention were paying attention. Perry said, loud enough for the line, 30 minutes to ruin our prep cooler. Exciting Tuesday. A few cooks smiled, the quiet kind. Zora didn't hear it or didn't show that she did. She was already in the cooler, moving fast and decisive, the way someone moves in a kitchen when they're not thinking about impressing anyone, when they're just cooking. She came out with her arms full. Chicken thighs, a bunch of fresh thyme, a quart of stock, half an onion that was left from someone else's prep, dried chiles that were tucked in the back of the spice shelf, behind things that got used more often. She found a lemon. 2, actually. She pressed one between her palms to wake it up. She put the skillet on high heat and didn't touch it for 90 seconds. Just let it build. Her grandfather had taught her this. The pan isn't ready when you think it is. The pan is ready when the pan decides. When she laid the first chicken thigh in, it made a sound like a starting gun. The line cook nearest the fish station, his name was Otis, had been on the line at Caldwell's for 4 years, trained at a program in Atlanta. Stopped moving for 2 full seconds when he heard that sound. Then he went back to his work, but his head tilted, just slightly. Zora didn't hover. She let the fat render. She cracked pepper directly from the grinder, not measured, counted, the way Leonard had counted, by instinct and the smell that rose up when the heat hit it. She peeled and halved the onion, pressed it cut side down into the fat that had collected in the pan, let it go. She didn't touch any of it for 4 minutes. The smell started changing at minute 2. By minute 3, it was doing something to the air in the kitchen, not loudly. The way a door opening in another room changes the pressure. You don't see it, but you feel the shift. Lillian at her expediting station looked up from the tickets. She didn't say anything. She just looked toward the heat. At minute 6, Zora added the stock slowly, working it up from the fond on the bottom of the pan with a wooden spoon. The same motion her grandfather had made, not the French technique she'd read about in library books. This was something older, something that came from a different kind of knowing. She took the dried chiles and crumbled 2 of them directly into the liquid with her fingers, rubbing them between her palms first, releasing what was inside. Otis looked at Perry. Perry didn't look back. At 22 minutes, she plated. No tweezers, no squeeze bottles. She moved like she'd plated this particular dish 1,000 times, which she had in her apartment in Nashville, on plates that didn't match, for herself and sometimes for no one at all. She put a small amount of the braising liquid in the bottom of each plate, not pooled, placed. The thigh on top. The onion, caramelized and opened like a flower by the heat, beside it. A strip of lemon peel, crisped in the fat, laid across the top like punctuation. She carried the 6 plates to the pass herself. Boone came to the pass. He looked at the plates for a long moment. The kitchen got quieter, not silent. A working kitchen is never silent, but quieter, the way a room gets when something is about to happen that everyone in it knows matters. He picked up a fork. He cut into the thigh. The meat pulled apart the way braised meat should, which is to say it didn't require effort. He took a bite with some of the liquid and a small piece of the lemon. He chewed. He set the fork down. He did not set it down because he was finished. He set it down the way a person sets something down when they need both hands free to process what just happened. The kitchen was watching now, not pretending not to. Otis had half turned from his station. Perry was still, arms crossed, expression somewhere between skeptical and suspended. Boone picked the fork back up. He took another bite, this one slower. Then he said something that was not for anyone in particular. It came out quiet and without performance, which was the only way you'd know he wasn't directing it at the room. What is this? Not a challenge, not an accusation. The real question. The kind that comes when a person who has spent 30 years in kitchens tastes something that doesn't fit any of the categories they've built. Zora said, "My grandfather's braised chicken, he made it every fall. He called it his thinking food. He made it when something needed to be worked out." Boone looked at her. He looked at the plate. He looked at the chicken thigh opened by heat, the onion, the lemon. He ate the whole thing. He didn't say a word while he did it. When he set the fork down for the last time, the kitchen was as quiet as a working kitchen gets, which is not completely quiet, but close. Perry picked up the second plate. He didn't ask permission. He just picked it up and tried it, and didn't put the fork down for 2 minutes. And when he did, he looked at his own shoes for a moment before he looked at anything else. Otis said quietly, from the fish station, "Can I try it?" Nobody said no. By the time the other 4 plates were cleared, by the crew who passed them hand to hand without announcement, the kitchen had reorganized itself around Zora, the way a space reorganizes around a new piece of furniture that turns out to be exactly the right size. Boone walked to his office. He came back with a clean chef's jacket, a white one with Caldwell's in small script above the breast pocket. He held it out. "I'm not offering you a position," he said. "I'm offering you a trial. 6 shifts. You start Thursday." Zora looked at the jacket. She didn't reach for it immediately. She looked at it the way you look at a door you've been waiting 2 years to walk through, long enough to be certain it's real. She took it with both hands. Perry said nothing. He had gone back to his station, and he didn't look up, and he didn't say anything about dishwashers or 30-minute experiments or anything else. He worked his station with the clean, focused energy of a man who has recalibrated something privately and doesn't intend to discuss it. The one person who spoke was Otis. He was already back at his own station, eyes forward, voice low enough that only the 2 or 3 people nearest him could hear. She caught the bass in 40 seconds. He shook his head, not in disbelief, in the particular kind of respect that only people who work hard at something can give to someone who is clearly better at it than almost everyone in the room. 40 seconds. The 6:30 expedite began. The kitchen moved back into service rhythm. Orders came in, tickets printed, the familiar controlled chaos of a dinner rush in a 3-star restaurant resettled over the space like a wave coming back to shore. Zora stood at the pass with her jacket over her arm. Lillian Cross passed her on the way to the dining room with a rack of water glasses. She didn't slow down, but she glanced sideways at Zora and said, with a precision that only makes sense if you've been watching longer than anyone else in the room, "Thursday, 5 a.m. The produce delivery comes at 5:15 and someone has to count it in." She didn't wait for a response. She pushed through the door into the dining room with the water glasses and the posture of a woman who has just done exactly what she intended to do and doesn't need acknowledgement for it. Boone was at the board, marking up a ticket. His back was to the room. He spoke without turning. "You can go." Zora went. Outside, the October air in Charleston was warm still, that soft southern October that apologizes for summer without fully letting it go. She walked 2 blocks before she sat down on a bench near the waterfront and held the jacket in her lap with both hands. She wasn't shaking. She'd expected to be shaking. She called her mother. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. She called back. Same. She sat with the jacket and the sound of the harbor and the smell of the city and the particular feeling that comes after a thing you've been preparing for your whole life finally happens. Not triumphant, not relieved exactly. Something quieter and more complicated. Something that sits in the chest like a warm weight. She thought about Leonard, about the step stool, about the cast iron pan he'd kept for 40 years, about the way he said, "The roux doesn't lie," about the look on his face when he tasted something she'd made and closed his eyes, which was the only review that had ever really mattered. She took the recipe out of her back pocket. The paper was soft at the folds from how many times it had been opened and folded closed again. She didn't read it. She didn't need to read it. She knew it the way she knew her own hands. She folded it back along the same lines and put it in her pocket. That evening, back at the house where she was staying for the wedding, she told her friend what had happened. Her friend said, "You didn't even have a plan," and said it in the way that means it's a compliment. Zora said, "I had a recipe." On Thursday, she was at Caldwell's at 4:50 a.m. The street was quiet. The delivery truck was already idling at the corner, waiting for 5:15. She was the first one there. She didn't have keys. She waited outside, jacket on, bag on her shoulder, the carabiner clip holding the zipper shut. Quentin arrived at 5:05 to unlock the back. He looked at her standing there in the dark and said, "You came back." "I came back," she said. He held the door. 6 months later, Zora Finch was running the sauce station at Caldwell's. Boone had offered her the position at the end of the trial shifts without announcement, sliding a schedule across the pass, one evening with her name on it in a permanent slot, the way things happen in kitchens that have absorbed someone, without ceremony, without drama, with the particular efficiency of people who communicate best through action. She still had the notebook, 43 recipes, plus the ones she'd written since Charleston, since the produce deliveries and the sauce station and the slow, earned education of a 3-star kitchen, where almost no one asked where she'd trained anymore, and the ones who still wondered already knew the answer was nowhere, and didn't know what to do with that, so they watched her hands instead. The cast-iron skillet she'd pulled off the wall that Tuesday night, the old, coal-black one, had developed a particular patina in the months since, the kind that only comes from regular use, from someone who understood what a pan was for and treated it accordingly. Boone noticed. He didn't say anything about it, but he stopped assigning anyone else to that station. Perry, for his part, had stopped making jokes about the back door approximately 48 hours after the braised chicken. He and Zora had developed the particular working relationship of two people who don't entirely like each other, but respect the work enough not to let that get in the way. It was not friendship. It was better than that, in the way that professional respect earned through proximity is sometimes more durable than anything easier. Lillian Cross, who had suggested the 30-minute trial without being asked and without explaining why, never once said, "I told you so." She didn't have to. She had been expediting long enough to know that the room always figured it out eventually, and the only thing worth doing in the meantime was holding the door open far enough for the right people to get through. There is a step stool in a kitchen in East Nashville, leaning against the wall beside the refrigerator. It's been there for years. The rubber feet are cracked and one of the legs wobbles, but nobody has thrown it away. Zora's mother keeps it there. She isn't sure why, except that the house feels right with it there, the way some things do when they've been in a place long enough to become part of it. Talent doesn't need a stage. It needs a pan, a wall, a floor, an open back door, and enough time to let the heat build the way it wants to build. It knows what it's doing. You're the one who doesn't know yet.